How often are you, your company, your industry navigating some sort of identity crisis? Well, if you're in oil and gas, the answer is probably quite often. And if you've read any headlines this week related to oil and gas, you've probably seen plenty of examples of things that could be characterized as pending identity crises. And whether that's on the mergers and acquisitions front with the curious deal between Cabot and Cimarex, where a company like Cabot, with its assets primarily here in Pennsylvania, pretty much in one county, focused on natural gas alone, is now aligned with a company in a different basin, with a different mix of products, different culture, and will be transforming into some new company. And while transformation might be the buzzword, the reality is that if you're an employee of Cabot, and you've been with them for years, and you've seen what they've done, and you've seen their pretty straightforward business model, you may very well be going through some sort of identity crisis right now. Or if not as an individual, certainly as a company, as the transition heads forward, assuming shareholder approval and all the checks of the boxes that need to be done for things to move forward. And you can look at the headlines from Exxon, which again will continue for some period of time chugging along with the behemoth it is, but with this question of whether the 2 seats they lost on the board this week are representative of an eventual shift in their identity. Will they be forced to change tracks and focus on different things and have a different strategy? And while, again, it seems almost inconceivable that Exxon wouldn't be primarily a oil and gas company, what we saw this week is a sign that says, well, maybe they will have to be. And so again, if you work for ExxonMobil, you start questioning, well, who am I? Where will I be in 5 years or 10 years, or the way things are accelerating, maybe much sooner than that. So too with Chevron and Shell, who both experienced some pressure to say, hey, look, what you guys are doing in terms of reducing your emissions, reducing your footprint isn't enough. And whether it was the lawsuit for Shell or the shareholder vote for Chevron, the result is the same. It's saying, look, we recognize that you're going to be good stewards and you're going to continue producing hydrocarbons in a safe and effective manner, but you're not doing enough. Which begs the question, from an identity standpoint, are they going to be told to be a emissions reduction company first, and then maybe, if possible, continue producing the life-sustaining hydrocarbons that they've been doing for years? Or will they be able to be an energy company first and to do things as well as possible, but without artificially changing their identity, if you will, into something that they're not? And one other headline this week, and these are not too uncommon, is a company that changed its name to again reflect what they see as a new focus, a renewed focus on ESG. And I say renewed focus because so many oil and gas companies have been doing ESG, or whatever you want to call it, and focused on sustainability for years. But of course, they need to recognize the pressure of investors and the industry as a whole, and outside influences and government influences and whatever they are. And so in this example, it was what was formerly Ultra Petroleum, who a year or two ago became UP Energy and is now Pure West Energy. They changed their name by their own admission to reflect what is a new approach, a new identity, if you will. Yet they're basically doing the same thing. They're just doing it in maybe a slightly different way or with some different labels. So the question is it really an identity change? Is it an identity crisis? Or is it really just them continuing doing their core thing with some ancillary noise and some different signage? And so moving on to you, the question is, whether you're working for a company in oil and gas or any industry, whether you're between jobs, as things change, as those signs change, as the label on your hard hat changes, or whatever the case may be, do you feel like you're suffering some sort of identity crisis unnecessarily? Do you feel like things are changing and you have this angst and anxiety when at the end of the day, what you do and what you wish to do and what you wish to accomplish is remaining unchanged? Because if so, take a step back. Use this long weekend to reflect and figure out, well, what is your identity? What is it tied to? Because if it's tied to your industry, if it's tied to your job title, if it's tied to your company, is that really where you want it to be? Or should it be tied to something else, something outside of your work? Whether it's family related, community, faith, whatever it happens to be. And if you can identify that, if you can identify your identity and where it lies, then you may not be as susceptible to these potential crises, which could be crushing to you, to your energy, to those you work with, to your family. And if you're one of the people who says, Joe, no, I do identify as an oil and gas professional. I love this industry. Crude runs through my veins. Or I do identify as this particular role. I love geology. I love reservoir engineering. I've got a PhD for Pete's sake, whatever it happens to be. This very much is my identity. So don't try to dismiss it and force me to look elsewhere. This is who I am. Or if you've risen through the ranks and maybe you're the CEO of a company and you did that because of hard work and intention, and that's where you wanted to be. And yeah, you identify as a CEO. And yeah, if somebody took that away from you, you'd be pretty upset and it would be crushing, and for good reason. And to you, I say, that's fine. That's great as long as you recognize it and you're conscious of it. But you're still susceptible to chinks in the armor, if you will, when it comes to that identity of yours. So how do you deal with it? It's inevitable. Your company, you will be attacked in some way, shape, or form. Your job title might not be available. So if your identity is tied to that, what is your plan to move forward? And again, heading into this long weekend, I ask you the same question. What can you do to better protect yourself, better protect that identity? For those of you who need to identify it, identify your identity first. For those of you who are concrete in what it is, start with the question of how you protect it. And for those of you who are in that position, I offer a lighthearted way to approach this heading into the weekend, and that is to go ahead and Google the blunder by the Pittsburgh Pirates yesterday. And if you've already seen it, I recommend you go and watch it again, or as I've done, watch multiple feeds, different television feeds and radio feeds from the two different stations, the Cubs and the Pirates, because it's fascinating and scary and embarrassing and all of that, of course. But what it can tell you is that if you were that poor first baseman who made this blunder, which some are calling perhaps one of the biggest figurative errors, there was an error charge, but it actually wasn't directly related to the mental error that the first baseman had. If you were in that position, it doesn't take away everything that you have done for the years to get there. That Will Craig, that first baseman, is and will forever be known as a Major League Baseball player. Sure, he's only I think, a couple weeks in the majors, but you can't take away all of the years of hard work and determination to get there. And I'm sure his identity is tied up in that, and that's fine. But as he works through the inevitable embarrassment and memes and everything else that's being thrown at him, he needs to recognize that his identity is not based on that one play and shouldn't be, but is based on everything he's done up until that point. And none of that changes. And so too, you need to remember, if your title goes away, if your company goes away, if it changes names, if your industry collapses, you can't take away all of the various things that got you there. No matter how specific and technical they are, that should be a source of pride, especially if that's tied to your identity. And that's okay. But how do you deal with it? And again, one of the best ways to do it, I find at times, can be good-hearted laughter, much like the members of the Cubs team in the dugout were laughing quite hysterically at the poor misfortune of the Pirates. But again, at least for the Pirates, they're used to embarrassment. They're used to being laughed at, and they're used to being called people who are going through an identity crisis because they've been identifying as a Major League Baseball team for many years when in fact they appear to be nothing short of a minor league team, although yesterday some would argue that it was a notch or two below that. So with all of that being said, as you head into this long weekend, ponder those things. Make sure you understand what your identity is. Make sure you understand how to protect it. And maybe most importantly, as you head into the weekend, if you identify as an American, remember why you have this long weekend. Remember those who identified or may not even identify themselves as heroes and who gave their lives for this country, for this, ultimately, this long weekend. And remember that no matter what, no matter how people revisit history and look upon them and what they gave up and whether it was worth it or not, it doesn't take away their courage. It doesn't take away everything they did. That is their identity. And it doesn't matter what external forces are out there. It doesn't matter what talking heads or media or government regulations change you in your industry. And it doesn't change what happened to those who gave up their lives for our country and who we recognize on Monday. So enjoy your long weekend. Give some thought to that. Give some thought to yourself. Give some thought to your family. And thank you for giving some time to me and my ramblings. And with that, thanks again. Take care.